Hi, this is attorney David Gibbs with the National Center for Life and Liberty. The COVID-19 crisis continues to pound the United States of America as we've become the nation with the largest number of confirmed cases, and tragically, our death count continues to climb. It's anticipated, my friend, that 250,000 Americans, over a quarter million, will die from this virus, and potentially 20% of the churches and ministries in our nation may have to close their doors because of this pandemic. At the NCLL, we're committed to keeping people safe and healthy and saving churches and ministries across the nation. I firmly believe that if you give good people good information, they're able to make good decisions. Now, as we look at the current situation across our nation, at this point, all states have implemented some type of mandate. These mandates limit gatherings or requiring a full stay-at-home remain in place for what the government labels non-essential employees. A number of localities and states have imposed criminal penalties for violations of these mandates. Now, these unprecedented measures are creating challenges for churches and ministries as they operate across the nation. At the NCLL, we're often asked, are the actions of the government constitutional? Now, I'd like to make it perfectly clear that everyone understands that the rights of the American citizens are being violated. Our rights to speak, to worship, to assemble, even in commerce and in business, we're watching the rights of the American people be violated. The question that the courts would examine is, are these violations justifiable? The government would have to establish two things. Number one, that there's a compelling reason for their actions. And we certainly would agree with the government that the health and the safety of the American people is indeed a compelling reason. The second thing the government would have to establish is that their actions were the least restrictive alternatives available to them to deal with the compelling reason without unduly violating the rights of the people. Now, at this point, with the situation being agreed to by both of the major parties, with Washington, D.C. and the state capitals in large agreement, the courts would generally accept the fact that the government is acting in the least restrictive manner. At this point, the NCLL is going to continue to monitor, and any church or ministry that's concerned can reach out. But at this point, the government would be able to establish its burden in court. Another constitutional legal question that's coming in is, am I putting my church or ministry at risk by considering or accepting any of the government loans that are becoming available? At this point, we believe that churches and ministries are able to accept these funds without any infringement on their doctrine, their beliefs, or their activities. These loans were out of Washington in a bipartisan effort. Senator Marco Rubio led the way to make sure that churches and nonprofits were included. And it's a full understanding that this government money is to come in and infuse capital into the employers of our nation, with the goal that these employers are then able to retain employees. Now, there's many components to the law, but churches, regardless of their belief or denomination, there's no litmus test or requirement, are able to avail themselves of these funds and programs. And there are no strings where the government would be able to come in and control what you preach, what you believe, or how you operate under this particular program. So we do not have legal concerns. If there are churches or ministries that are uncomfortable, we always recommend that they follow their instincts and do what they deem best. There's no requirement to participate, but we don't see a tremendous religious liberty risk to participation. Another question that's coming in with these mandates is, are my employees or volunteers essential employees, people that can still go out under some of these stay-at-home mandates? While this varies from state to state, our position at the NCLL has been that churches, certainly when they're doing their online services, their video recordings, their audio recordings, getting things out to their congregation, that their people, and I'm talking about employees and volunteers, are deemed essential. Your employees or volunteers may need a letter from you stating what they're doing, And remember that you're not just doing church work, but when you're putting it online, you will also fall under the media exception in many jurisdictions. And so it's our opinion that churches are able to deem certain people as essential, even in states where that's not completely clear. Some states have deemed even going to church as essential, and so it is a state-by-state analysis. Now, a lot of churches are saying, what should we consider as we are looking at how to evaluate this pandemic? Well, number one, we're recommending that every church know what is legally required in their state as well as in their local jurisdiction. This is so your leadership team can ascertain what is required and what options are available to you. And we do recommend that churches follow state and local mandates at this time. Second question to evaluate is what is practically effective for our church. If you're a church of 20 or 30, it's different than if you're a congregation of 2,000. And all of the individual nuances of ministry and what you have to be properly evaluated. But number three, and I encourage pastors to think about this, what are the community optics for your church? Very important that your ministry understand you have a testimony, you have a reputation that is going to be determined by how you act. And cooperating for the good of the citizenry can leave a lasting impact that will help your future ministry. I remind people that I talk to on the phone that much of what's not allowed right now in America is really the result of our tremendous blessings. Many churches have incredible campuses, facilities. We enjoy our large gatherings where we can come together for preaching and worship and time together. But right now, those blessings are not able to be afforded to the church like they once were. But we do need to remember that we are still the church, and God can still do work despite these less blessed circumstances in which we find ourselves. I also remind people to remember that the motivation of the government in this case is not to infringe on religious liberty. We would fight that vigorously. But they are working to protect and provide safety and health for the citizenry. Now, people ask clearly, what should my church do? And as an attorney, I strongly recommend, if you're under a state or local mandate, that your church reasonably comply at this time. If you're having concerns or questions, you can reach out to the NCLL, and our office will talk with any church or ministry across the nation. And we do that as a ministry. That's at no charge to the people reaching out. Now, as you continue to evaluate this situation, some things we're learning about the virus. Number one, it's highly contagious. We understand that it can spread quickly. Number two, the medical experts are saying it has not peaked here in the United States. That is expected to occur around late April by most of the estimates that we're receiving at this time. This virus, number three, tends to be more dangerous to older people and those with weakened immune systems. Number four, the social distancing in our culture right now is intended to limit the volume of individuals needing medical care at one time so we do not overwhelm our healthcare services. Number five, we now know that some areas of the United States have been more heavily affected. New York City, New Orleans, Los Angeles, to name a few, that it is not universal across the nation. Now, as we look at this situation, there's some things we still do not know about the virus. Number one, we have no idea how long this disruption that we're experiencing is going to continue in the United States. Number two, it's uncertain. Will this virus return to Asia or other parts of the world where it has peaked previously, and what will its behavior be like? Number three, there's no firm understanding of when normal life can be resumed across the United States of America. Government restrictions and recommendations right now, number four, are in place until further notice. Now, questions we're receiving that deal with ministry and issues. Number one, can we implement a drive-in church prayer or service model? And my answer to that is yes. In most states, that is completely acceptable. You're in your own vehicle, you're isolated, you're in a small group, you're with your family. I would recommend, however, that you notify local law enforcement so you don't run into any unexpected surprises. Number 2, can we meet more often in smaller groups? And the answer is yes, that can generally be acceptable, but most of that right now with some of the shelter-in-place mandates are having to move to Zoom or other video conferencing, looking to more of the online model for small groups and Sunday school. Number 3, if our church chooses to disobey the government recommendations, what might happen? Well, my friend, in several states, there could be criminal consequences. You can see in the news some pastors have chosen to publicly disobey, and they've been arrested. Now, I do want to say at the National Center for Life and Liberty, we believe that when you take a stand, number 1, it needs to be the right stand. That will always line up with the Word of God. Number 2, it needs to be done the right way. But then number 3, it needs to be done with a right spirit. And I encourage pastors and ministry leaders to be careful. The aggravation, the frustration, the fear of the moment can at times attack our spirit. And I remind people that our spirit is our testimony. Question number 4, is it advisable right now, Attorney Gibbs, to reduce services and outreaches? At this time, absolutely. We would advise churches to cancel all outreaches, events, and extra services. At this time, that is advisable. Number 5, how do we collect our church's finances if we can't take offerings? Well, churches are figuring a number of ways. You can have online giving. You can put a box where people can drop it by. You can put it where people can mail to you. But I would encourage pastors, don't hesitate to reach out to your core. Those are your 10 to 20% that give most of your income. Right now, they're fearful as well, but if they understand the church needs the help, reaching out and asking for donations right now is something you should not be embarrassed to do. Lastly, we get asked, how do we minister during this time? Pastors, there's fear across the nation. Church leader, we understand the stress and pressure you're under. But I remind you right now, the model of seeing everyone once or twice a week at church and preaching to them and spending time with them, that was a model we grew accustomed to, and it's easy and it worked well. But right now, we're going to have to do more individual, reaching out, ministering to smaller numbers, the phone calls, the video conferences, the extra time in prayer and Bible study. Nothing that is going on in the United States of America has caught God by surprise. I'm looking forward to saving many, many churches and minimizing casualties across the nation. If you have any questions or issues or wonder what you can or cannot do, the National Center for Life and Liberty, visit our website, ncll.org, or telephone us, and we will be honored to serve you.